Welcome to the NC Baptist Podcast. I am Todd Unzicker, your host, and I get the privilege of serving as the executive director for your NC Baptist State Convention. We are a movement of churches on mission together. We exist to help churches fulfill her divinely appointed call in the Great Commission. And today we are going to do that. We are going to talk about the Great Commission with a dear friend of mine, Keelan Cook. Keelan, how long have we known each other?
It's been a minute now, man. At least a decade.
At least a decade. Keelan, his wife Meredith, they are awesome. Dr. Keelan Cook serves as the director for the Center for Great Commission Studies at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's a North Carolina Baptist. He's a member of Faith Baptist Church in Youngsville, and we love your pastor, Stephen Wade. Keelan has served overseas and also served an association. And so, Keelan, you have literally spent your life in the Great Commission. And I love you and I. Maybe that's why we hit it off. That's
probably part of it.
For me, from day one. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Keelan spent the morning with the entire NC Baptist staff talking through demographics, trends, specifically in North Carolina, but there was a lot of it that was in the United States. And so for ministry leaders, for deacons, for pastors, for elders, for anyone who's listening to this podcast, or maybe somebody who's going to get into ministry, Keelan, what would you say are the three biggest trends? What are the three things, or maybe two, I don't know, whatever you got, that folks ought to know now?
Yeah. So first, thanks for letting me be here, man. I've had a ton of fun with the staff today. It's been a good conversation, and I look forward to getting to speak about it a bit on the podcast here with some of your pastors and those who are listening. As far as trends are concerned, so we isolated it down to three that we discussed in the room earlier, and I think those are absolutely applicable and would be worth sharing with your listeners. So kind of three, if you'll say demographic trends, population shifts, something to that effect. Here in North Carolina, it's true in a lot of places, but especially true for us here. So the first one, we're in the midst, and have been for a decade, 15 years now, of rapid and significant cultural and religious diversification in our state. So cultural and religious diversity is at an increasing and a rapid rate for us. So that's one. Two, there is a rise in Generation Z, specifically in their influence on society. So both them as a cohort, a generational cohort, are kind of coming of age, but they've also got this significant, I would say, influence that they're starting to wield over the way we as a whole society think about things and do things, and they're adjusting our worldview, so to speak. And then the third one is one that really caught me off guard. There's this significant rise here in the state of North Carolina in post-retirement in-migration. So people who are moving in from all kinds of other states who are actually over the age of 65. And we're experiencing what I would label really as the post-retirement possibility for the Great Commission.
Right. So I heard that in three buckets. Well done. You can tell you're a Baptist. So there's what I kind of heard you saying is think international or foreign born.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That influx, the rising influence of Gen Z.
Yes.
And then third is the retirees, the over 65 crowd. That population is exploding. Let me zoom out for a second. I think I heard you today, if I heard right. North Carolina is the third fastest growing state in the country. You showed us, I believe you said this state was in 1990 was about 6 million, and it's projected by 2030 to be about 12.
That's right.
Doubling in size in 30 years.
That's right.
Did I get that right?
That's correct.
That missiologically alone, that for those who do ministry, who live as followers of Jesus in North Carolina, that just alone is profound effects.
Oh, no doubt. So, when we talk about the harvest fields, if what the scriptures say is true about our mission, that it's this people-oriented, this people-focused mission, we have this ministry of reconciliation that we've been given to plead with others to be reconciled with God, right? If we're in the people business, the doubling of your population as a state, that has everything to do with mission.
Right.
And so we've got this opportunity, I'd call it a stewardship, that we're given, particularly here in the state of North Carolina, that other states don't have in the way we do. The Lord is bringing so many people here. And the question then becomes for our churches, what are we going to do about that?
Right. So North Carolina, as you know, Keelan, because you are a North Carolina Baptist, we have a rich and proud history. We're the top giving state to international missions, the top sending state convention of most missionaries on the field. And obviously we want to see every unreached, unengaged people group, have the gospel in their heart language.
Sure.
But let's drill down on the internationals, the foreign born that are here in North Carolina. Unpack the hood. Let's lift the hood off that. Who's coming?
Yeah.
What are some of what are you seeing at the Center for Great Commission Studies at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary? What are you seeing there?
Yeah. So there's all kinds of stuff on this one. I think it's biggie on the eye chart for us. This has got to be one of our major things that we're considering. In our state, we're seeing a microcosm of what is true nationally in one sense. In another sense, we're seeing it at a more severe level. So on the whole, the United States is in a position where our percentage of people who were born in another country is higher than it's been in about 100 to 115 years. So it's record-setting levels right now of people who are moving in really from all over the world. And that's certainly true of us here in North Carolina. We're a little lower in percentage currently. We're sitting at about 8%. So 8% of the people that live here in the state, if we've got somewhere between 10 and 11 million people, probably closing in on that 11 million number right now, we're looking at about 900,000 probably of those people.
Close to a million. Yeah,
we're just under a million. Of those people are born in another country. That's a significant portion of our population.
But if my math is good, and I'm a professional Christian, so my math is not usually that good. But in a state that's about 10 million, what you're telling me is almost 10% of the population in North Carolina is foreign born.
That's right. So if you're in a shopping mall, right, or you're at the grocery store, somewhere like that, on average, if you see 10, 12 people, somebody was born in another country, most likely. Now, that's going to vary from county to county in the state. Some counties, they're not experiencing that kind of percentage share. Some of ours in major metro areas. So think the Triangle, think Triad, think the Charlotte area. Those areas, there's some. The percentage is actually much higher than 8%. Sure. And so you're going to run into a handful of people in those places that were probably born in another country. The thing that makes North Carolina so unique among other states, our rate of growth is actually quite a bit higher than some other states.
Wow.
And we've got all these different streams of why people are coming here and what they're doing. Particularly in the Raleigh area, we've got 3 major universities that have thousands and thousands of international students that cycle through, every year. And you've got in the Triad area, Toyota is in the process right now of putting in one of their largest factories anywhere they have in the world. And those kind of international and economic ties and partnerships that are made in other places bring in tons of people. And so that kind of thing is bringing us people from really all over the world.
Right. And about a third, I think if I remember, at least a third are obviously going to be Hispanic, predominantly Mexicans.
That's right.
A lot of Honduras, El Salvador. But what shocked me was the number coming from Asia. Is that coming, we have amazing universities, as you highlighted, amazing universities, right here around the Triangle, NC State, UNC, amazing universities like Meredith and North Carolina Central. We also have Duke. But that's driving a lot of this Asian immigration. Talk about the South Asians a little bit right in the Triangle.
Yeah. So when you look at that graph, so I showed a graph that had countries of origin for our immigrants who are coming in here. And this is all based on census data. Of course, far and away at the top is Mexico. It's been the largest sender country to America for decades and decades and decades now. So that's no surprise. What's a surprise are, to your point, all of those Asian countries that are starting to kind of creep up and pass countries from the global south, so Central and South America. Those used to be all the top spots. They're not anymore.
Yeah, I saw India number 2.
That's right.
At 10%.
In specific, South Asia is sending massive amounts of people, particularly to our state right now. So, and you alluded to this, Raleigh, North Carolina, the metro area around here is one of the largest pockets of the South Asian Indian diaspora in the United States. Wow. It's a massive community. And it's, ironically enough, it's just right here around the office for the state convention. The Morrisville area is probably the epicenter. It's one of the, like I said, largest diaspora communities of Indians in the United States now. And some estimates will say that it's over 100,000 people in the area here that belong to that particular diaspora group. Wow. And when we start talking about groups like South Asian Indians, we're now talking about people that are coming from a Hindu or a Muslim or a Buddhist background and are far from God. These are the very places that our IMB is working so hard to send people to because they have no access to the gospel back where they are. Yeah. It's the least reached places, the hardest to reach places. And here they are in, Morrisville, just down the street, right?
Right. Revelation 5 right here in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
Is what you're saying. Let's shift gears. Gen Z. Gen Z would be basically born in a little after 2000 or right around 2000.
Somewhere around that, yeah.
They are early 20s, finishing up high school. My daughter is in the 8th grade, and I think technically she's like maybe the last, depending on which one you look at. But they're entering the workforce now, coming into adulthood now.
Yep.
Talk about what is their growing influence? How do they have such an influence?
Yeah, so I mentioned that trend in a specific way. The cohort size for Gen Z is actually not really large. So you think of the boomer generation, or you think of the millennial generation, and so much of the press that came out about them.
By the way, I'm Gen X, and let the record show that once again, Gen X just gets forgotten and skipped.
That's it.
We go straight from boomers to millennials to Gen Z, but go ahead.
Yeah, we've been skipping over Gen X and basically everything ever since its inception.
We were the generation that came home by ourselves. So anyway, go ahead.
So both, like, when you think about like all the press that came out or comes out on the boomer generation, all the press that comes out on millennials, it's about the size of the cohort, right? Oh, there's so many people. That's not true of Gen Z. Gen Z's smaller. But they're now at a pivotal age where they are, as you mentioned, they're in or finishing up college, they're entering the workforce, they're starting to take positions that will eventually and very quickly turn into positions of leadership in business, in government and society, and civil and civic organizations and places like that. And so they're at a peak moment for us. And even more than their time frame, there's been this weird phenomenon I think is demonstratable through research and how much we as a society as a whole have catered to the desires of Gen Z in marketing, and advertising, and the way we've done media. Everything's kind of geared at getting their eyeballs. We talk about an attention economy nowadays. Well, Gen Z eyeballs are the ones we primarily wanted because they're going to be the new consumer class at some point. Because of that, the worldview that Gen Z has developed over time, I think, has a disproportionate influence really on society as a whole. We're all starting to think in some sense like Gen Z.
Right. They are driving what I hear you saying, and I've heard you say before, is they were the smartphone generation.
Absolutely.
So instead of coming home and watching the news for a little bit, they're getting the news instantaneous, big highs, big lows every day. They're fast, and that is what I hear you saying is that's influencing all the ones before them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. So they are, you just brought this up, right? So they are the first generation to grow up really from birth with the smartphone being a thing, right? Now, my generation, millennials, we're the internet generation. This is different. This is not, they've got the internet. This is, they've got the internet in their pocket. That's a fundamentally different thing. Right. It is completely shaped how they think and how they feel about stuff. And so on one hand, Gen Z, when you ask them to report about themselves, so there's several studies out there that are self-reporting Gen Zs about their thoughts and how they feel about certain things. They tend to be a group that has really high ambitions, and they're really kind of optimistic about their own hopes and futures and dreams, and yet are saddled with an unbelievably high level of anxiety about everything around them. So when they talk about themselves and what they think they're going to accomplish,
right,
it's huge. When they talk about the world around them, they think everything's getting ready to fall apart.
Oh.
The world's, things are going to get worse. I'm okay. Things are going to get worse. And it creates this kind of weird double-mindedness. Turns into a level of anxiety.
Wow, fascinating. And then the last one you touched on, which was surprising, and I learned a term today that I'd never heard before, the halfbacks.
Yeah.
Talk about the 65 and older crowd. Why is that so key right now?
Sure. Again, national trend here. The United States is getting older. That's true everywhere. But North Carolina's got something unique going on. So your majority culture kind of demographic class, we're talking, Anglo-American here, there has been this long, slow trend of having less kids than needed to keep that cohort the same size.
Right.
So we're seeing this kind of slow decline in Anglo-American population in general. That means that cohort's going to get older.
Sure.
So it's just going to age out. So in areas where that's the primary demographic, the area is getting older. So that's just kind of a trend everywhere. North Carolina's got something unique going on, though. There's two ways we're getting older as a state, and every county is getting older.
Wow.
The minimum growth was somewhere around 5 or 6% aging or growth in the aging population over 65. Some counties are experiencing a 50, 55, closing in on 60% growth in the 65 plus grade. It's unbelievable. But it's not just the birth rate issue. We have this ridiculous amount now of post-retirement in-migration to the state. So think with me, we're on the I-95 corridor from New England all the way down to Florida, right? This is where that term halfback that you mentioned comes from. There's this idea of people, and this is a long-running kind of meme or a stereotype, people from up north, they snowbird, they retire down in Florida, right?
Right.
Well, to go halfway back is right where we are.
Huh.
And so there's this growing movement of people that are going halfway back, and they're halfbacks. And so North Carolina is getting significant increase at this point in a post-retirement crowd of newcomers from other states, particularly in New England. So you think Boston, that area, New York.
Yep, my wife's family's from there. So
there you go. Yeah. So, and like nowadays when I'm driving around Wake Forest, the number of like Yankees bumper stickers I see. I mean, we've got a Wegmans now. Why would we have a Wegmans? It's because, well, we've got all these people that are coming up from the north that are coming down here, and they've got a whole grocery store now.
Right.
And so we've got this significant influx that's coming in. And the thing to know about this particular cohort of people, I think it starts changing our assumption some about what ministry should look like to people in that upper generation.
Sure.
Our assumption is oftentimes like failing health, fixed income. So how do we care for these people? I want to challenge that. I think this is one of the significant trends for us. A lot of these people that are coming in, they're healthy. They've actually got plenty of money. So they've done well. They're headed into retirement. They've finished out a major chapter in life, and now they're wondering what's next.
Right.
With gas in the tank.
Yep. I saw a Forbes study on this a few years ago that said the average retiree will live 20 years in retirement.
Exactly.
And they're looking for something to do.
That's right. There's some ways where I find this slice of the population actually has some similar parallels to that young guy or gal that's graduating college right now. Major life transition. I'm looking at my future going, how am I going to use it?
Right.
But this is a second career moment. I've had a career. I'm done.
Right.
But now I'm looking around going, what am I going to do with the next 15 or 20 years? Right. That puts a person in a spot that I think is particularly interesting when it comes to questions about the Great Commission.
Right. Well, and speaking of that, coming up here in North Carolina, in the Raleigh area, is one of the premier equipping events of the year, really in the nation, is the Disciple Making Conference. And what implications of these kind of three big rocks, what do you think for a church leader, a layperson who's teaching Sunday school or a small group, or somebody who's wants to leverage their life more for the glory of God? In a disciple-making aspect, how does this affect that?
Yeah, I think it affects us in a whole bunch of different ways as far as that's concerned. I'll try to keep it concise here, though. It's too little to say think like a missionary, though. That's what I'm getting after here.
Yep.
Increasingly, we're seeing a diversity in the kind of people we're going to run into and the way they think about things.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have the same worldview anymore. You've got unbelievable linguistic diversity now. There's over 300 and something languages spoken in our schools in North Carolina. Wow. That means, it's unbelievable. That means we've got to be able to think about how we communicate the gospel clearly to people who don't speak like us, to people who are from a different religious background than us, people who have a completely different worldview than us. And that's actually true in all three of those trends.
Absolutely.
So with the first one, we're thinking, cross-culturally in a more traditional sense. But the whole Gen Z influence thing, their worldview seems different than what we've had in the States classically. We tend to think in a guilt innocence frame, right? I'm guilty before God, and the gospel allows me to take Christ's righteousness. That's completely true. That's the way the Bible talks about it. But there's other ways that cultures
honor shame with a lot of internationals,
exactly
Asians
right.
coming.
So when we talk about these other cultures coming here, we'll talk about an honor shame paradigm or a fear power paradigm. There are ways that our own Gen Z cohort is looking more like a fear power or a tribal paradigm now than what we've been used to in the past. So how do we think about engaging them in the gospel? How do we make disciples in a group that thinks different? And then, of course, you've got the potential for mobilization that comes from that post-retirement group. They've got fuel in the tank. How do we activate them for mission?
Yeah.
How do we engage them with the gospel?
And we say a lot around here with North Carolina Baptist that missional is the new attractional, that the churches that are going, whether that be going across the globe or across the street, are the ones that are growing. And listen, Keelan, my head is spinning. I'm sure our listeners are. You can go back and re-listen to this. You can put it at that half speed if you need to really digest this a little bit. Sure. But I want to encourage our listeners that if you want more of this kind of data, Dr. Keelan Cook is not only a missionary at heart and in practice, but a missiologist in helping you in your context think through that. You can find him at the Center for Great Commission Studies at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. You can contact us at ncbaptist.org. Go to our website. We're going to have a lot of this information. We want to help churches fulfill the Great Commission. And with North Carolina rapidly changing, the time to start was yesterday.
That's exactly right.
We've got to start looking at this. Keelan, thank you for being a part of this today. And we're going to have you back. We're going to talk more about this. You can also make sure to plan on being at the Disciple Making Conference, February 25th. At the Summit Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. There will be a lot of discussion on this, a lot of fantastic speakers and breakouts, plus a time to really collaborate with other ministry leaders around who are facing these same challenges and these same opportunities that the Lord is giving as He sends the harvest field to us right here in our backyard. Keelan, thank you so much. It is great to be on mission together with you, and so thankful how the Lord is using you.
It is always a pleasure to be here, Todd. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the NC Baptist Podcast. I am Todd Unzicker, and we invite you to like, subscribe, hit all the buttons that you need to hit, and thank you for listening. Good to be on mission together with you. Thank you for joining us today. Because of your generosity to NC Baptist, this podcast, along with other helpful resources, are made available for you. Learn more by visiting ncbaptist.org/give.